The following programming is made possible through a generous donation from Randall Lewis, Executive Vice President of Upland-based Lewis Operating Companies. The Randall Lewis Seminar Series, an ongoing program of the Center for Sustainable Suburban Development at UCR's School of Public Policy, proudly presents Water and Our Future. What's it to you?
Welcome to the first Randall Lewis Seminar online. Ron Loveridge, I'm Director of Center for Sustainable Suburban Development, and for the past 10 years we've had what we've called the Randall Lewis Seminar Series. The series have focused on major issues and questions facing all of us in inland Southern California. Probably there's no issue that we're talking about more and trying to understand is the issue of water. Water is sort of up front and in the center ring. We all know that we're finishing the third year of drought and about to enter a fourth. And the question is, what does it mean? What is it to us? Last Thursday, Celeste Cantu presented her talk, which she said it was titled Water and Our Future, What's It to You? It was among the best talks that I can remember, and we're going to have this kind of talk and sort of sharing some questions on this online seminar. Let me just briefly introduce Celeste Cantu for you. Born and raised here in Southern California, Imperial County, degrees from Yale and from Harvard. Clinton administration, Celeste was had a title of State Director for Rural Development. Under the Davis administration, she was chair of the California Water Quality Control Board, and for the last, 6 years?
7 now.
7 years. She has been general manager for the Santa Ana Water Planning Authority. She is married to a professor of English at San Diego State University, a mother of 2 children. But when you look around and ask the question, who would you like to talk to about water? I know of no one that I would like to talk to any better than Celeste Cantu. And so it's our opportunity to have this kind of exchange, this kind of seminar, and I look forward to the next 45, 50 minutes. Celeste Cantu.
Thank you. And thank you for spending time to learn about your water and your watershed. So starting not so much in the beginning, but in 1968, the 5 major water wholesalers in the Santa Ana River Watershed, which is San Bernardino, Riverside, and most of Orange counties, came together and decided to create a joint powers agreement and create the Santa Ana Watershed Project Authority, SAWPA. And since then, SAWPA has been working to solve problems and do long-range planning for this watershed. In 2007, early, we kind of took stock and looked around and realized that we were facing what we thought at that point was the perfect storm for water challenges for not just this watershed, but all of California. And we have learned in these last 7 years that we were exactly right. So we started by characterizing these as initially the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which people were pretty familiar with, and now the 6 horsemen of the apocalypse. We used this icon as something that we thought people could relate to, and we thought it really did impart the level of concern that we needed to talk about to get people's attention of what our water was facing. So we're going to spend some time learning about what each one of these 6 horsemen represent to us in our watershed and what we're doing about it. So first we'll dive deep on the first horseman, which we call population growth and development. And it's not that we're just going to grow, it's how we develop that makes a difference in our water world. And you might ask, well, what does that have to do with it? Well, in the Santa Ana watershed, we mine 60% of our water budget comes from groundwater in the ground. That groundwater is replenished by a variety of ways, most efficiently by, you guessed it, Mother Nature. Mother Nature puts snow in the mountains and rain in the valleys, and that percolates into the ground and replenishes our groundwater. But we also have highly engineered opportunities where we encourage water to get percolated by ponding it and putting it over land that we know percolates to replenish our groundwater. With this mechanism, we can aggressively manage our groundwater to really take care of our water needs. But as we develop, some of that land is more important for percolation and gives us a great economic benefit than others. And if we were to develop it, and we do endeavor to grow, you can see from this slide, this is kind of what my commute looked like this morning. As we grow and interrupt that hydraulic mechanism, that natural hydrology where Mother Nature replenishes groundwater, if we hardscape it, pave over paradise, we like to say, with asphalt and concrete, that function no longer happens. So we have to be particularly vigilant as we look at how we develop to make sure that we're not hardscaping over some benefits that Mother Nature does for us for free. So that's our first horseman, is how we develop. Our second horseman is the water energy nexus. Many people don't realize that water and energy are completely connected on both sides of the equation. When you look at how energy is used in California, almost 20%, the highest single use of all the energy in California, is used to treat water, move water, and heat water, delivering it to your homes. So every time you save water, you're saving energy. On the other side of the equation, we generate a lot of energy with hydroelectric power. As our streams go down, and we are moving into tomorrow, the 4th year of a drought, those stream flows reduce. And as that happens, our ability to generate hydroelectric power is reduced. So you can see on both sides, if you save water, you save energy. And when you use energy, you have to remember it took water to create that energy. So now that we realize that there's a lot of synergy there, it gives us a great opportunity to look at how we can do very efficient and synergistic things to help both sides of that equation. The next horseman, we call him the third horseman, is financial crisis. And I'm not so sure this is a bad horseman at all. This may turn out to be our best friend. But looking at history, the way we finance big projects is generally, broad brush, a third of the money from the federal government. We used to call those earmarks, kind of a thing in the past. We don't have those anymore. And a third of the money from bonds in the state of California. And those have been few and far between, but we will have an opportunity this next November. And a third by our very own ratepayers. So now, without earmarks and with state bonds, haven't had one for a while, we really need to look exclusively at our ratepayers and say, hey guys, remember us? We've been behind the scenes creating a reliable water source for you, and we think you've taken us for granted. And perhaps we've taken you for granted too, but now's the time to reach out, and we need to really develop that relationship. And I think that's a healthy thing. We look at our water challenges and realizes those solutions have to come at the local level, the watershed level, we think. And it's got to come with the support and the full knowledge of our ratepayers. They've got to be involved in that equation. The reason I think this horseman might actually be our friend is because we've had the ability to pay for great expensive projects, $50 million, $100 million projects, we've kind of had that luxury to look around and say, well, I have a problem, and I'm going to fix that problem by getting a lot of money together and engineering to fix. And we did that kind of in a piecemeal way. It was very effective, but when we look around, we realize perhaps we could have saved money if we took a more holistic, watershed-based way. And if we look to foreign countries, particularly countries that are arid and dry like we are, they have not had the luxury as much money as we've had. And they've worked to solve many of their problems by working collectively. Since no one entity could get together $50 million, they had to get a whole lot of people together over a large range and say, what can we do in our entire watershed that solves this problem, not just for us, but for everyone? And it turns out that's less expensive. I think this is a good road for us to go down. So I'm a little ambiguous as whether the fourth horseman is our friend or our enemy. We're very lucky in this watershed, unlike any other watershed in California, in that we have 5 sources of water. So when you look at risk management or looking at trying to find a resilient way to operate, and that's what we're really focusing on in the 21st century, having 5 sources of water is a great luxury. When you read in the papers about communities who are running out of water and having to have water trucked in, they generally have one source of water. We have 5. So groundwater we've already talked about. Imported water, both from the state of California and from Colorado River, represent 2 and 3. And number 4 is recycled water, and of course rainwater that falls exactly in our watershed. So our next horseman we'll talk about is the Colorado River. Colorado River is in a 14-year drought. We're very lucky. We have senior perfected rights on the Colorado River, meaning that if there's a drop left in it, California is going to get it. But we don't know how strong those rights might be if we actually get down to seeing not enough water for Las Vegas or not enough water for
Phoenix.
Arizona, Phoenix. Phoenix has done some really innovative things, and we applaud them for that. We have a lot to learn from them. But we wonder how strong our senior rights might be if things got to be very, very dry. So I have some slides to kind of show you. We say we're in the Santa Ana watershed, and we are, but we also benefit from the Colorado River Basin, 7 states, starting with Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and finally California. So the Colorado River is a very long river. It starts way high in Colorado. It's fed by the Green River that starts in Wyoming, and it comes all the way down south and is finally taken in a conveyance system to California, where we really benefit from it. Here's a picture that's kind of scary. This is Lake Mead at its lowest level in history at 35% capacity. We are getting to the point where creating hydroelectricity is going to be a challenge. We're getting to a point where Las Vegas is changing its intake because they're going to be sucking air, as they say. So this is really something that we need to seriously think about. The Bureau of Reclamation, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, did a very important study called the Colorado River Basin Study and made some very ominous predictions. They said by 2060, if things follow the way we expect them to do, we will be short on the Colorado River the same amount of water that it takes to bring water that the city of Las Vegas takes today. So we will be short an entire city of Las Vegas worth of water. That's a really ominous prediction, so we really need to think about how we use those drops wisely. In California, we also have a very sophisticated water delivery system. Everyone's heard about the Sacramento-San Joaquin Rivers Delta, and everybody knows the danger is in Delta. The Delta is in danger, and it's actually in danger in more than one ways. We have known for a very long time that the levees that protect the Delta from flooding with salt water from the ocean have been very fragile. And we talked for a long time about how they're vulnerable to earthquakes, and everyone knows we're due a major earthquake. Personally, I grew up out in the country, and I always thought it would be gophers that would take down these levees. They're not engineered. They're just big piles of dirt that have been there for now decades and decades. And it's not really the best way to protect the heart of our water delivery system in California. But the state of California has taken stock of that. Since Hurricane Katrina, we really realized horribly bad things could happen. We got the political will, we got the money together, and they have been steadily making improvements. So that's the good news. But we have lots of other things we need to be concerned about. The San Joaquin Delta is home to a little fish called the Delta smelt, and I'll show you a picture of it here. It's a cute little fish. It's about the size of your pinky. It's kind of a picky eater, not a very good swimmer, likes to hang out in a place where they turn the pumps on to move that water from Northern California over the Tehachapi's and into Southern California. So several years ago, a judge said, you need to reduce pumping by 30% in order to protect the Delta smelt. And the Delta smelt's kind of like our canary in the mine. We have to pay attention to it because it's giving us a signal that things are not working well. So we did that. Some people called that a regulatory drought. And that was just a precursor to what we would discover later, which was a real drought. California has come out, is still in, and there's no sign of coming out of the driest years in our recorded history. Some have said the driest years in the last 1,500 years, having looked at petrified tree rings. So they can look in the past and say, this has been a really dry year. Here's a picture of the State Water Project. You can see it's a big canal that brings water down. It has some problems. It evaporates. It's been actually a lot hotter than normal, so water evaporates more regularly. There's other vulnerabilities to it. The plan now is to put this water in 2 large twin tunnels, and those tunnels will be underground. They're sized very, very large, and that makes some people nervous. But they're sized that way to be responsive to Mother Nature. What our climatologists tell us is when we look into the future, we can expect fewer storm events, but flashier storm events. So in this watershed, what that means is instead of having 11 to 13 storm events, which we're used to, 3 of them kind of big and the rest kind of small or wimpy, we're used to that pattern. But instead having maybe only 3 to 5 storm events, and 1 or 2 of them maybe humongous. So these tunnels are sized that when there is a big storm event, they can take a big gulp. And when it's dry, they maybe won't take anything or take small sips. So it's a different way to be responsive to Mother Nature. I want to share with you some pictures of the Delta. People are very confused about where the Delta is. So it's a classic Delta. You can see in this slide, which shows everything draining into San Francisco Bay. But it drains a very large part of California, the Great Central Valley. And it's just kind of a lacy network of waterways, all of which are pretty vulnerable. This delta used to be among the most prolific fishery in the world. It is still very prolific, but not with native species, mainly with exotic species who eat our native species. Here's another picture of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta from the air. You can get a better sense of the scale and scope of the project. Well, they were built kind of as needed by farmers who took their tractors and backhoes and scooped up big piles of dirt and piled it around their fields to keep the water out. They weren't engineered. Now, some of that has been rectified and we still have a lot more work to do. But they're pretty fragile, particularly by today's standards and the way we generally engineer levees. The land in the delta that's being farmed is very, very fertile. It's made out of peat. And peat's great for growing a lot of crops, but it also evaporates. It actually evaporates when it oxygenizes. So this has been going on for a long time now. So these valleys, the farming area, are now 20 to 30 feet below sea level in some cases. So you can imagine, you know, if one of those levees were to break, water will come rushing in, and that'll be salt water. If we have salt water running in there, that's a tremendous problem for not just the people farming in that area, but for all of Southern California. Because we do not want salt water. We can't drink salt water. We can't farm with salt water. It would be a tremendous environmental disaster.
I went to the University of Pacific in Stockton, and I remember well the peat dust storms and how it would look like a kind of fog. You'd reach outside, and whether it's a car or a windowsill, and your hands would be kind of covered with peat dust. It happened at least several times a year.
Yeah, it's very fertile for growing tomatoes and almonds and peach trees and a lot of our, you know, crops that we grow in California that feed the world.
And asparagus, which was
asparagus.
Yeah. That's
true, but it is fragile, and we don't know how much longer Mother Nature is going to kind of be on our side on this. It's been engineered. It's been used so efficiently that we think its resiliency is down to the very last drops. And so it's time that we really look at the heart of California's water delivery system and make sure it's protected for today and for our children and for our grandchildren. So let's talk about another horseman, climate change. And there's lots of different ways to talk about climate change, and we're still figuring out what it all means to us. But we do have some facts. And here's a picture showing what the temperature has been, including drought conditions, in the western half of California. So you can see we're not alone, but that doesn't give us much comfort. Not only is our water system affected in California, but this means the Colorado River system is also affected. So while our portfolio of water is very diverse, and we've done all the right things, this perfect storm has really brought an impact to all of it, and we really need to think about what we need to do differently. Here's a focus on just California. Some interesting data came out recently, and this was done by Dr. Bill Passert and his colleagues, and they looked at records from 1950 to the year 2000 and found on average that temperature increase for nighttime or cool temperatures has gone up almost 2 degrees Fahrenheit throughout California. So when you have a drought, you worry because you have a lack of water. But when it's warmer, you have to worry doubly much because it means what water you do have evaporates. Your plants need more water. Everything transpires and evaporates much more quickly, and it makes all matters worse. So it really compounds the problem. So when we talk about drought, you need some visuals because here we're kind of used to being in a dry area. It doesn't rain much in Southern California no matter what, and we rely on other systems to bring us our water. The way our rain patterns are here, the difference between a wet year and a dry year may be just 1 or 2 storm events. We get most of our water, we're a Mediterranean climate, so most of our water comes in, precipitation comes in November, December, January, and February, with December and January being where most of that wet water falls on, the months that we get rain. So if you miss a weekend and miss a storm event, you may miss the big rain event of the year, being that one event may tip the scales from being a wet year to a dry year. So sometimes we need some visuals to really let us understand how dry is it really. So here's visuals of September 1st, all of the reservoirs. Now California has a lot of reservoirs. We've done a lot of planning for dry years. And you can see in this visual that there's a red line showing where average is. And then you can see where we actually are with the blue line. We are very low all the way around. Unless it starts raining tomorrow, October the 1st, and we have no indication that it will, these reservoirs are not going to supply us water forever. It's really time to think about how we can live within perhaps a new water budget. Another visual, here's Lake Oroville. Now this is a beautiful picture. If anybody's feeling anxious and if they're a water resource manager, they look at this picture and they feel a lot better about everything. This picture was taken in 2005, and you can see it's full. That's not the way it looks today. Just a year later, 2006, this is what Lake Oroville looked like. And if you really want to get nervous, this is what it looked like last week. So when you think of storage, you realize that we are down to the end. We had really good planners. They did a really good job of anticipating what we needed. But when it came right down to it, we can't store forever. Water is finite. And we are at the point now that we really need to think about how we use water. Here is the map on the temperature change that I imposed the wrong map, so you may have to figure that out later. So with drought and with warmer temperatures comes fire. Now everybody in California knows that we have a fire season, but what a lot of people don't realize that the fire season is now year-round. This is just a picture of fires that were big major fires that were underway last week. Fire season is something that's very, very serious. Our forests have become so dense because of our regime of fire suppression. We do that for really good reasons. People recreate and people live in the forest, and we have to keep them safe. But that's allowed a tremendous amount of what some people call fuel density, other people call forest trees. And so when we get a fire, the natural fire regime does not prevail. It doesn't move quickly the way Mother Nature's fires did 100 years ago. Instead, we get a catastrophic fire. And you might ask yourself, what does that have to do with water? Well, it turns out it has everything to do with water. In this watershed, 90% of all of our precipitation falls in the United States National Forest, the San Bernardino National Forest. So we've entered into a memorandum of understanding, and now our best friends is the U.S. Forest Service. We realize now that the way they manage the forest has everything to do with how that precipitation is managed. After a catastrophic fire, and unfortunately we have experience with this, we have tremendous debris flows that flow into our waterways, clogging things up. That makes that water that comes with it unusable because it is so full of debris and so full of particles. We have to wait for it to clear, and we lose a lot of water. And it costs millions and millions of dollars to manage those debris basins. A smarter way would be to get to a more natural fire regime, and that's the plan now. So with all this change and all these challenges, the perfect storm of the 6 horsemen of the apocalypse having arrived in California and right here in the Santa Ana River Watershed, you can imagine what ensues. Conflict ensues. The case for working together, many people would say, is absolutely the way to go. But the problem is made more challenging because we have a legacy of silos. You can kind of say that the first half of the 20th century was characterized for around a sense of efficiency, to optimize. And we did this not just for water. We did this in education and in manufacturing, and we did it in almost everywhere you looked. We looked to create efficiencies and to get rid of redundancies and to divide everything down to the smallest unit, and then through command and control, we thought we can control it. And actually we produced a lot of water that way. But through the second half of the 20th century, we pretty much realized that there were a lot of unintended consequences. And we started talking about sustainability. And we said, if we could just get Mother Nature to a stable state and keep it in that stable state and manage it sustainably, we'll have water, or whatever it is we were planning for generations to come. But towards the beginning of the 21st century, we've kind of come to terms that really Mother Nature does not stay in a stable state. Mother Nature's always evolving, devolving, evolving, constantly changing. And it turns out this is true also for organizations and peoples and many things other than Mother Nature. So now we're kind of driven by a new principle, and that is one of resilience. The idea of being resilient given a variety of circumstances confronting us, not knowing which or all of them might prevail. And that's what we're looking for now. And under the principles of resilience, you want redundancies. You want diversities. You want to have many choices available to you. Some scholars are saying we've lost the era of stationarity, meaning the future is going to be quite different than the past. And we can't look to the past to help us predict the future. We've got to be nimble enough in order to be responsive to any variety of things that might happen. It makes for very exciting but trying times. The main thing we realize is by working together, we have a much better chance of coming to the right suite of conclusions. So SAWPA has put together a group called One Water, One Watershed, or known as OWOW. We've brought together more than just the water community. We've integrated business community, of course environmental community, but also ratepayers, people like you, and a variety of other considerations to say there's so many moving parts. If we work together, the chances are greater that we may get it right, or at least have a suite of options that are likely to get it right. This strategy has proven so far to serve us very well. It is laborious, it is slow, but we believe we come up with a better product.
Didn't you get a Kennedy Innovation Award for this effort?
Yes.
I think it's the only Kennedy Innovation Award I know of in inland Southern California.
We were very honored to get that award. And as part of that, we were invited to Stockholm to the International World Water Week, which is really the biggest water conference in the world. It happens every year in August in Stockholm. And we were very proud to be able to share with the rest of the world what we were doing. But lucky for us, our presentation was on a Thursday, and the conference started on a Monday. And through those days that I was attending the conference, I realized that the rest of the world has been doing this for a long time. It's relatively new to California, but the rest of the world's been forced to do this because they had less resources to work with from the get-go. They didn't have the money, they didn't have the water, and they realized working together can solve problems more effectively. So we're kind of catching up now with the rest of the world. So we're guided by several principles for OWOW, and they are that we should look at the entire watershed. If we look at all of our resources and all of our challenges together, we're more likely to be able to find ways to meet our budgets. And working in concert with Mother Nature is cheaper and more effective in the long run. And to see each problem as interrelated and look for efficiencies and synergies in solving that problem. We realize that we need to collaborate across boundaries. We need to blow up the boxes, as one of our governors used to say. We need to work with people who we're not accustomed to working with, who speak different languages than we do. It's all English, but we've all been trained in our own disciplines, which are distinct. And it takes a while for all of us to come together and learn how to communicate about these really trying projects. We realize that not one person can do it alone. It's going to take the authority and the involvement of many, many people to get our work done. And we need to think big. We need to be innovative. We have to leave a lot of options open, so everything needs to be on the table. We have a shared vision for the watershed. It's something that people from different disciplines can appreciate. We're looking for breakthrough innovations and a water ethic. And the water ethic may seem simple enough, but it's actually a heavy lift. It's asking every water user in this watershed to know where their water comes from a lot of places, so that's not an easy answer. How much of the water they use, what they put into it, and where it goes when they're done with it. Because water travels downhill, and we may use it today, but somebody else downstream is going to use it tomorrow. So we've come up with some really interlocking strategies that we think if we put them all together, we will improve our chances of being able to have enough water for population growth in this watershed and a robust economy. We're really quite confident about that, and it has several major pieces. One is water use efficiency. It turns out, depending where you live, if you're on the coast, about 50 to 60% of all treated water, and if you go further inland, closer to 70 to 80% of all treated water is used on landscaping. It's used outside.
Once you repeat that, because I think most people, when they think of water, they think of what happens inside the house, in the shower or in the bathroom, not what happens outside.
When we ask people where they think they use their water, everybody assumes they use the majority of it inside the house, because that's where they interact with it the most, in taking a shower or washing dishes, brushing your teeth. But it turns out that could be as small as 20%. So it's really the short end of the stick. Most of the water's outside. And that's a shocking realization to a lot of people. Now, grass in the Inland Empire needs 55 inches a year to grow green. We generally put closer to 100 inches a year on it because of automatic sprinkler systems. And you know, we're not very good farmers anymore. We're not very good landscapers. We're homeowners who have busy lives, and we rely on the sprinkler system. It turns out grass is the biggest water guzzler that exists. If we were to plant anything else, not rocks, not xeriscape, not even just drought tolerant, but anything besides grass, we could save 75% of all the water that we use outside. So our first biggest move is to say, we need to change our style of landscaping, like hemlines or the width of your tie. It's a style change. We've only had this grass style since about World War II. It's kind of new to have as much green grass everywhere as we do now, but we really don't have the water budget for it. And we could have a much prettier garden, actually, that is much more diverse, better for the birds and the bees and the butterflies, and also prettier to look at. So we kind of think if the only person who walks on your grass is the person who mows your grass, you probably don't need that grass there. Now, if people play on it and kids are playing soccer or baseball, that's great. And there's room in our budget for that. But there's not room for just ornamental grass just for being green. There's lots of other green plant materials that take half or less than half as much water, and lots of pretty flowering things that bring a much bigger color palette to our eyes. So all of our members and others are looking at programs that really encourage people, and actually there's financial incentives now, to take out their non-functional grass and replace it with beautiful flowering and shading trees. We talked a little bit about Forest First a bit. We think that's a really important move also, to look at what Mother Nature gives us in our watershed and more effectively utilize that. We've got some room to grow there. We've also asked for a really major paradigm shift, and that is to ask our flood control managers to also be water conservation managers, and they've embraced this. So now we think of the drop not as a flood drop or a drinking water drop or a groundwater drop or wastewater drop. We look at it just as H2O, and we realize that we can manage it more effectively if we sort it only as water. So now our flood control guys are looking at opportunities to operate their flood control responsibilities, also creating opportunities to conserve drinking water. So the 20th century is all about hardscaping channels. So when we had big rain events, and we do have them here from time to time in this watershed, that we got that flood water out of our area and to the ocean where it could not harm property and people. But now we're rethinking that, and we're thinking, let's slow it down. Let's let it percolate. Let it be our drinking water. That's a whole different regime. It costs a lot of money and a lot of different ways to think about things, but everyone is embracing this, and this is the right way to go. Recycled water is one of our 5 eggs in our basket for water sources. This watershed has always been a leader in creating recycled water in California, and I think we will continue to be so. One of the things that we should look at is how we manage water. If we think of it just as the drop, and we realize that the drop is used many, many times, you know, we recycle water today, but really Mother Nature has always recycled water. All the water we enjoy today is water that has always been on this earth. In fact, some say it's all been dinosaur pee at one point or another. So if we think of the drop in a way that is always going to be used, we might look at opportunities to take our imported water when we have it at the top of our watershed and use it many times over as it rolls down the Santa Ana River before it reaches the ocean. We can get more uses out of it. It requires a lot more money to make sure when it's put back in the river, ready for the next user, that it's in pristine condition, and we are totally behind that. We also have to spend a lot of money on salt management. People are salty, and we accumulate salt, and water helps us flush that salt out of our body, so it carries salt with it. So we have a lot of desalters in this watershed, and we'll probably need a lot more going forward. Here's a picture of one of our groundwater desalinization plants. We do an excellent job of this throughout this watershed, and it has served us very well. You've heard a lot recently about new legislation that was just signed by the governor a couple of weeks ago, and it's called groundwater management legislation. It's new for California. It's not new to this watershed, however. We've been managing our groundwater here on our own aggressively and successfully for a long time. The rest of the state is following our form now. You can see from this slide that our groundwater management zones are identified throughout our watershed, and we have water resource managers and water masters and others coming together on a regular basis to make sure that we're doing the right thing as we move forward. It's an intensive process, but it's one that's absolutely necessary for our sustainability. All in all, we see ourselves as going holistic. We need to have everybody included at the table. Land use planning is one of the main things. As we talked before, one of our horsemen is how we develop. Our alluvial fans, for example, that are in the foothills are particularly productive in being able to catch water and percolate it into our aquifers, replenishing our groundwater. We need to work hand in glove with our land use deciders to make sure that what we do, we don't regret later.
So that's one question that sometimes comes up is that we have all this water in the oceans, and so why not just use the water in the oceans?
Well, it's true. 97% of all the water on Earth is ocean water, and it's salty, and it's much saltier than our groundwater. We can relatively inexpensively desalt groundwater because it has a little bit of salt in it, not that much. The ocean has, of course, 10 times more salt in it, and it's much more expensive. So that's a plan. That's something. It's a move. It's something that can be done, and there's lots of projects underway right now, or lots of exploratory projects and some projects underway. It's kind of last on the list because of its cost. We may get there, but water's heavy also, so you can take the salt out. But then if we're going to distribute it throughout the watershed, everything is uphill from the coast. So that's expensive to pump that water up. So it's on the list, but it's kind of last on the list. It's kind of the move of last resort. Other countries have done it when they have no other options, and that's probably the right way to think about it. All in all, this slide kind of says it all for me. If we can orchestrate a water ballet between land use and water use, we will be much better off in being able to meet our goals for today and for the future. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between hard path and soft path. Hard path is kind of how we characterize the 20th century engineering fixes that are often discrete and solve a problem, but maybe don't solve a whole suite of problems. Soft path is more focused around cooperative agreements and ways of doing things differently that may solve a much larger suite of problems. So for example, on water use efficiency, sending a price signal to our ratepayers so that they know when they're going over an efficient use of water, that would be soft path. It's not as expensive, and it's proven to be of the utmost effectiveness. All in all, we've got to get it right. If we don't get it right, we're staring at a very, very dry situation, and one that we're not going to even want our children and grandchildren to live in. We have the skills to do the right thing. We have the legacy of working together to do the right thing, and we will continue that process. So with everybody's help, including people who use water, you're the biggest component to stay within our water budget, we ought to be just fine. We have an opportunity later this year, next month, almost next month, in November, at the election, to look at a water bond. We haven't had a water bond for a long time. The leadership of our legislators and our governor have put one on the ballot, and it's Proposition 1. It doesn't solve all the problems. Its detractors would say it's not a silver bullet. I agree it's not a silver bullet, but it's a down payment on a 21st century way of managing our water resources. It gives a lot of authority to local areas so you can do what's right within your watershed. Everybody in California says one size does not fit all, and I agree, California is very diverse, but we do have the necessity to look at our own watershed and to see what our needs are and what our resources are and make the right decisions locally. Prop 1 will allow us to do that. It gives money for more recycling, something that's going to serve us very well. It gives money for groundwater replenishment through stormwater capture, something that we know has to be part of our equation if we're going to continue to rely on groundwater at 60% of our water budget. It does a lot that is consistent with what we believe our water future will do. So it's expensive. Financing projects through bonds are more expensive than financing projects through ratepayers. But it is the tool that's available to us, and California desperately needs it.
Well, Celeste, thank you very, very much for the overview. I have two final questions I would like to ask. One is just as you look at the watershed in 2014, what would you say are the top 2 or 3 issues that are facing this watershed?
Water use efficiency is by far the number one, and that is, since we take water for granted, our water suppliers have done such a good job to make affordable, abundant, high-quality water available to us at our taps and in our sprinkler systems without interruption. we've, as consumers, have taken it for granted. It's really now our responsibility as consumers, each one of us, to look at our water use and ask ourselves, knowing that close to 80% of your water is going on your outside, is that the most effective use of this very expensive and precarious resource that we have to have for quality of life, for our health, and for our economic development?
Sometimes the answer says, well, can't you regulate water by price? Could you comment on price as a way of regulating water?
Well, it's a really touchy thing because we know water is a health and safety issue. We cannot price people out of the availability of water. So we think the best strategy is kind of a tiered approach, and we call it water budget-based water pricing or budget-based rates. And that says, you look at a household and you say, for relatively inexpensively, you can provide the water on tier 1 for their inside personal use. That's your laundry and dishes and showers, etc. Tier 2 would be the efficient use of water outside. And that would be more expensive, of course, because landscaping is not as important as our health and safety, but still affordable. Tier 3 would be substantially more expensive, and it would say, you're not using water efficiently, you're wasting water, and it's going to cost you more. And that sends a price signal to people, and it turns out we're very responsive to price signals. You could have a tier 4 that says, well, we really need to get your attention because you're a busy person and you're not paying attention to your water use, and you're wasting water. In fact, you are wasting so much water that it's running off your curb down the street, mobilizing pollutants like cat waste and other airborne pollutants, and causing a toxic slug to hit into the river. So we're going to charge you for that pollution cost as well. People really get their attention. We really get their attention when we get to that point.
Finally, saw one discussion that the successful regions in the future are going to be marked more by cooperation than by competition within them. And as you outlined, you have had exceptional cooperation within this watershed. One, I guess, how is that cooperation taken form, and do you see that translating into a larger question, whether we can combine air and water and land and transportation and somehow think not only of the watershed but of this region in which we live?
I think that's the next step, and we've got to get there because everything is connected to everything else. When we look at water pollution, we see the way we lay out transportation and the way we shed the water that falls on those streets really has a big impact. We could maybe do a better job. Other people in the rest of the world are. So everything is related, and that's clearly the next step. We're so fortunate in this watershed that we have layers and layers and systems of people working together. And I think that's part of the legacy that started in 1968 with the creation of SAWPA, but it goes way beyond SAWPA today. And there's lots of groups coming together and have been coming together for a long time. They have nothing at all to do with SAWPA, but they know this is a mechanism that works. Unfortunately, not every watershed in this state enjoys that kind of legacy. Many of them are still characterized by, I want mine and, you go get yours. So, but people are coming along. The state of California is incentivizing groups like SAWPA to proliferate and rewarding them with money. So there's incentives out there.
So looking at the UCR magazine for it comes out once a quarter. This is fall 2014. It's covered the grizzly bear, but it says ideas for a thirsty California, how managing our water can help the rest of the world. But on back, I thought there was a wonderful quote. They're quoting, water is a limited resource, and yet it's vital to all of us. It's unconscionable to waste it. We thank you very much for participating in this first online Randall Lewis seminar. We thank you for your attention. The issue of water is front and center. And it's not going to be an issue that's going to go away in any short term.
I agree.
Thank you very much, Celeste.
Thank you.
Established in 2003, The UCR Center for Sustainable Suburban Development explores the social, economic, political, and environmental impacts that population growth and movement has on cities and local communities. The center facilitates interdisciplinary collaborations in the community through its staff and affiliated faculty via research, joint conferences, workshops, and public forums held at UCR and in the community. The center produces the Randall Lewis Seminars, which focus on a wide range of regional sustainability topics such as air and water resources, infrastructure and transportation, and the fiscal health of cities. For information or questions about this program, to learn more about future programming planned for the Randall Lewis Seminar Series, or to register and/or receive email announcements from UCR's Center for Sustainable Suburban Development, please contact the center at 951-827-7830 or email at shana.conaway@ucr.edu.